A shadow stretched across the skies of Earth, an immense fleet descending from the stars, its dark hulls shimmering with otherworldly designs far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. The silence of space was broken only by the hum of the ships as they glided closer to the planet below. Cities turned their gaze upward in awe. But this was not the awe of wonder, it was the awe of fear. People stood frozen on the streets, their eyes wide in disbelief, as the realization of the inevitable began to sink in. The world had no answer to what was coming. They had heard stories of alien invaders of distant races that would one day come to Earth, but they had never imagined it would happen in their lifetimes. No one was prepared for the magnitude of the assault that would follow. The first strike was swift and merciless. It began in the dead of night across multiple continents. Cities and military bases were reduced to rubble in the blink of an eye. The world's strongest defense systems fell to their advanced technology. Their ships unleashed terrifying beams of energy that turned towering buildings into dust in moments. Even the strongest weapons humanity possessed had no effect against the impenetrable shields of the invaders, and their ground forces were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The first wave of alien soldiers appeared as giant armored beings towering over humans with weapons that could vaporize entire battalions with a single shot. Their tactics were brutal and efficient. They moved like a storm across the land, unstoppable and cold. Panic swept through the world. As the invaders showed no mercy, they took control of major cities within hours, their forces landing in waves across the globe. Humanity's military was scrambled into action, but it quickly became apparent that their modern weaponry was no match for the alien technology. Earth's greatest minds were left baffled as they tried to comprehend how to combat this unstoppable force. Humanity's leaders met in secret councils as they faced the greatest threat to their survival. No one knew how to stop the invasion. No one could fathom a plan that would push the invaders back. As the alien fleet continued its descent, their messages broadcast across every communications network on Earth. They spoke in an alien tongue, but the meaning was clear. They claimed Earth as their new territory. They announced that resistance was futile, and that humanity would be assimilated into their empire, as had happened to countless other worlds. They had conquered. Their ships hovered above the major capitals of the planet, their overwhelming power a constant reminder of how little hope there was left for the people of Earth. But despite the cold certainty in their tone, there was something in the way humanity responded that the invaders did not expect. Amidst the chaos, there were whispers of defiance, hidden in the shadows of the shattered cities. In secret bunkers and military installations, humans gathered together, forming alliances across borders and political lines. They were not ready to surrender, no matter how overwhelming the odds were. The will to fight was still alive, and as the leaders of the world debated their next move, a message went out to every corner of the Earth. A message that carried a simple but powerful declaration: humanity would not yield to this new empire. Humanity would fight for every inch of their world. They would not be slaves. They would not bend to an enemy who saw them as nothing more than prey. Humanity would show the invaders what true combat was. As the sun rose over the ruins of cities once vibrant with life, the alien invaders moved with cold precision through the wreckage. Their commanders believed that the conquest of Earth would be swift, that humans would fall to their knees in fear and submission. But what they encountered instead was something they did not expect: a resistance born of defiance, raw and untamed, rising from the ashes of destroyed cities, a resistance fueled by the will to survive. The first blows against the invaders came in the form of guerrilla tactics, as groups of human fighters launched surprise attacks from the shadows. Their knowledge of the terrain gave them an advantage, and the aliens, who had grown accustomed to unchallenged power, found themselves struggling with unpredictable and relentless foes. Small bands of soldiers targeted alien supply lines, disrupting their communications and their movement. Humanity had always been outmatched in terms of technology, but they knew how to fight back. With what they had, the invaders had underestimated the resourcefulness of the human spirit. The resistance wasn't confined to military units alone. Ordinary citizens became soldiers too. Young and old alike, women and men, took up arms in whatever form they could find. Even makeshift weapons became tools of defiance. Every act of sabotage, Every ambush showed the invaders that the humans weren't as helpless as they had assumed in their arrogance. They had believed humanity would be easily overwhelmed, that they would be nothing more than cattle to be herded, but what they faced was something far more dangerous than they could comprehend. In every corner of the world, humans fought back with the same intensity, whether in the shattered streets of a once bustling city or in the isolated forests of distant lands. Resistance movements sprang to life, fueled by nothing more than sheer determination and an unbreakable bond to their homeworld. And in this dark hour of desperation, the human race found itself united in a way it had never been before. Nations that had once been divided set aside their differences to fight the common enemy, and from the chaos of war came a strength that no alien force could easily shatter. The invaders quickly realized that their strategy was not as flawless as they had believed. They tried to crush the resistance by sending waves of soldiers into every city, but for every alien that fell, there were more humans rising to take their place. Each defeat for the invaders seemed to fuel the fire of defiance in the hearts of the human fighters. Their lines of communication became less reliable as their technology was hacked and sabotaged by human engineers working under the radar. Their advanced weaponry, which once seemed invincible, was now vulnerable to human innovation. And in the midst of this growing resistance, humanity's best minds were already working on ways to turn the tide of war. They began studying the technology left behind by the invaders, reverse engineering their weapons and ships. With a desperate but brilliant determination, they had no choice but to fight with everything they had. And in the secret bunkers of military leaders and scientists, plans were made to strike back harder than ever before. The humans were not just resisting, they were evolving, learning from each encounter, adapting their tactics faster than the invaders could keep up. The invaders had no idea the storm they had stirred. They were not prepared for this enemy who fought not for dominance or glory, but for survival. The aliens began to question whether their swift conquest of Earth would be as simple as they had first thought. The human resistance was proving that there was something more powerful than advanced technology, something that couldn't be quantified by the weapons they wielded or the ships they commanded, something the invaders couldn't understand: the strength of the human spirit, and it was something they were about to learn the hard way. As the war raged on, and the tide of resistance surged, the invaders began to realize that their technological superiority was no longer the decisive advantage it once had been. The human fighters were no longer just survivors. They were learners, adapters, and most dangerously, innovators. In hidden workshops, underground bunkers, and makeshift laboratories across the globe, humanity's brightest minds worked tirelessly to reverse engineer the alien technologies scattered across the battlefield. Every wrecked ship, every fallen soldier became a piece of a greater puzzle. They were not merely scavenging, they were reconstructing the very weapons and tools that had once seemed impossible to defeat. At first, the improvements were subtle: a new weapon here, an adapted shield there. But with each modification, the humans grew bolder. They began to understand the alien tech with a speed that stunned the invaders. What had once seemed to be their greatest strength began to show cracks as human ingenuity turned their own machines against them. The first breakthrough came when an engineer in a forgotten research facility in the mountains of Europe successfully reprogrammed an alien drone, turning it from an enemy spy into a powerful ally equipped with human modifications. It became a weapon capable of striking down an entire battalion of invader soldiers with precision and efficiency. News of the victory spread quickly and hope flared across the war-torn world. The message was clear: humanity had not only adapted, but had begun to thrive in the face of overwhelming adversity. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about winning. The resistance forces now had a taste of true power, and they weren't about to let it slip away. The next stage of the war was set to be a technological battle, one that would forever change the rules of engagement. In the heart of the resistance, a new weapon was being developed, something more ambitious than anything the invaders had ever seen. It wasn't simply a weapon of destruction. It was a weapon of disruption. Humanity's scientists discovered a way to harness the very energy that powered the alien ships against them. By adapting the technology into a focused beam, they created a device capable of disabling the aliens' nearly impenetrable shields. The breakthrough was a game-changer. The weapon wasn't perfect, it still needed refinement, but it was the spark that ignited a fire of innovation among humanity's forces. Across the globe, engineers and scientists worked around the clock to improve it, and with every test, the weapon grew more powerful. Meanwhile, humanity's military forces, emboldened by the new technology, began launching more daring and successful missions against the invader strongholds in cities that had once been under alien control. Humanity's forces reappeared not as disorganized rebels, but as a professional fighting force, coordinated, precise, and equipped with alien technology. Turned against them, the invaders struggled to keep up with the constantly evolving tactics and weaponry of the humans. Every day seemed to bring a new threat they had never seen before, a new strategy they could not anticipate. The first major counteroffensive occurred in North America, where a series of alien supply convoys were ambushed and destroyed using the newly adapted weapons humanity had developed. The attacks were swift and brutal, leaving the invaders scrambling to secure their remaining forces. But the true shock came when a fleet of alien ships was taken down in orbit by the humans' new weapon. The aliens had never seen such a force before. It had disabled their ship shields, allowing humanity's fighters to pierce their armor and destroy them with unprecedented precision. The invaders were no longer facing a helpless population. They were facing an adversary that could strike at their very heart. In the alien command centers across the stars, the mood shifted from confidence to doubt. They had underestimated the human race. They had thought of them as a primitive species, incapable of challenging their might. But now they were forced to confront the reality that they were no longer the apex of technology. The humans had learned and adapted faster than anyone could have imagined, and the balance of power was beginning to tip in their favor. The invaders were not prepared for the true force of humanity's spirit and creativity. And now they were about to discover that true combat had only just begun. The momentum of the war shifted, and humanity's resistance grew into something far more formidable than anyone had predicted. It was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a battle for the soul of Earth, and the invaders, despite their technological superiority, were beginning to realize they had made a grave miscalculation. The guerrilla tactics that had once seemed hopeless now struck like a fist against the invaders' fragile defenses. The humans had not only adapted, they had evolved their methods of war from scattered attacks to coordinated strikes that shattered the invaders' infrastructure piece by piece. Across the globe, coordinated counterattacks launched with precision. Human armies, using weapons now powered by alien technology, swept across battlefields with unmatched efficiency. The invaders' military leadership struggled to respond to the ever-changing tactics of the humans. They had expected conventional warfare, but the humans had turned the tide with guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and hit-and-run tactics. The invaders soon discovered that the true weapon against them wasn't just advanced technology, but the sheer unpredictability of human combat. The Resistance's most effective tactic was to make every encounter a surprise. They didn't engage in head-on battles where the aliens could use their overwhelming firepower. Instead, they struck when least expected, hacking into alien command networks, planting explosives on critical infrastructure, and causing confusion and chaos in the ranks of the invaders. Humanity's soldiers became ghost-like figures moving through the shadows, slipping past invader defenses and causing havoc on a global scale. Each strike left a scar on the invaders' once perfect systems and forced them to spread their forces thinner and thinner. One of the most pivotal moments came when a group of human pilots, using newly adapted alien spacecraft, launched a surprise attack against an entire alien fleet stationed near Earth's moon. The mission was deemed impossible by many of the humans' military leaders. An overwhelming force of alien warships stood between the humans and their objective. But the pilots, trained in the art of unpredictability, launched their assault at the precise moment when the invaders thought they were safe. Their ships, though primitive by comparison, carried human ingenuity and innovation. They were armed with weapons that no longer needed to rely on brute force, but instead took advantage of the invaders' weaknesses. The battle raged in space above the Earth's atmosphere, and for the first time in the war, the invaders were forced to retreat. The news of the victory spread like wildfire across the planet, and humanity's spirit soared. The message was clear. The invaders were not unbeatable, and they were not going to have Earth without a fight. With each victory, humanity's confidence grew. They no longer felt like they were the underdogs. Now they were the ones dictating the pace of battle. The invaders' fleet, once thought invincible, was now vulnerable to human strikes. But as the human forces began to push back, they knew they were not yet in the clear. The war was far from over, and every victory brought with it the knowledge that the invaders would soon retaliate in greater force. Their enemy had not yet revealed all their weapons and strategies, and humanity's forces had to stay sharp if they were to continue their success. Still, the tide of war had irrevocably shifted. The invaders, once so confident in their dominance, now found themselves reacting to the humans' every move. They had underestimated the power of human resilience and innovation, and as their forces struggled to adapt, the humans showed them just what true combat looked like: a fight not defined by weapons or technology, but by the will to protect everything they held dear. The war had entered a new phase. The invaders had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and innovate, but the humans knew that this moment of advantage could slip away as quickly as it had come. The invaders still controlled vast territories on Earth, and in orbit their fleets were formidable, and their forces well-trained. Even as humanity had begun to strike back with increasing success, the humans' victories had been piecemeal, scattered efforts that had yet to decisively break the invaders' grip on the planet. In secret laboratories buried deep within the Earth's military strongholds, the brightest minds from every corner of the world had come together, working day and night to create a weapon that could change the balance of power, a weapon that would no longer rely on conventional warfare, but instead harness the very forces of nature itself. Their task was monumental. Their goal was to build a super weapon capable of matching the full might of the alien fleet. At first, their project seemed like an impossible dream. The team had to adapt and reverse engineer the advanced technology the aliens had brought with them, and fuse it with Earth's resources. This was no longer just about developing new weapons. It was about creating something revolutionary, something that could overcome the overwhelming odds stacked against them. The weapon's core concept was simple yet incredibly ambitious. A device capable of harnessing the power of Earth's sun and focusing it with pinpoint accuracy to incapacitate entire fleets of alien warships. The research was complex and fraught with failure at every turn, but each failure led to new discoveries, and slowly but surely the super weapon began to take shape. The scientists and engineers found ways to tap into the sun's energy using both alien and human technology, combining both to create a concentrated energy beam powerful enough to pierce the alien shields and damage their ships in ways previously thought impossible. As the final stages of construction neared, the global resistance leadership held a secret council and debated the weapon's deployment. The weapon was still untested, and there was no guarantee it would work as intended, but the alternative was to continue fighting a drawn-out war that could decimate humanity's forces even further. The decision was made: the weapon would be tested, and if it succeeded, it would change the course of the war forever. When the first test was conducted, the world held its breath. The energy blast shot from the device, and in an instant, it cut through the night sky with the force of 1,000 storms, striking a decommissioned alien warship on the outskirts of Earth's orbit. The blast was so intense it sent shockwaves across the atmosphere and even from the ground. People watched in awe as the alien ship disintegrated before their eyes. The weapon worked better than anyone had hoped. The successful test ignited a new wave of hope across the planet. Humanity had a weapon that could turn the tide of the war in their favor. The invaders, who had always believed themselves to be invincible, were about to face a force that could strip away their advantages piece by piece, and for the first time since the invasion began, humanity no longer felt helpless. They were ready to take the fight to the invaders with everything they had. With the weapon now operational, humanity's forces began to move with newfound confidence. They launched coordinated strikes against alien supply lines, using the superweapon to cripple the invaders' shield systems before overwhelming their forces with coordinated attacks across multiple fronts. The invaders, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tactics, began to retreat to their fortified positions. But the humans were relentless, and their strategy had only just begun. Humanity's greatest weapon was not just the superweapon itself, but the ability to use it as part of a larger strategy, a strategy that combined human ingenuity, unyielding determination, and an unwillingness to bow to any enemy no matter how powerful. The invaders' once unshakable confidence began to crumble beneath the weight of humanity's newfound strength. With every strike the humans inflicted on their fleets, the alien forces were forced to retreat further into their strongholds. The superweapon was proving to be a game-changer. Its destructive power had caught the invaders off guard, and it had shattered the illusion of invincibility that they had carefully cultivated over centuries. They had conquered countless worlds, and Earth had seemed no different, but humanity had become something they had never anticipated. A force capable of pushing back against their might, an enemy with the will to fight until the very end. The first signs of panic began to emerge within the alien command. Communications from the front lines were flooded with reports of catastrophic losses, and morale began to deteriorate. The humans were not retreating. They were advancing, taking back city after city, territory after territory. Even the most fortified alien strongholds, once thought to be impenetrable, were now vulnerable. The resistance had learned how to exploit the weakness in their forces, launching surgical strikes with the precision of a well-honed blade. And every time the invaders thought they had contained one front, the humans opened another. But as the invaders reeled from their losses, they began to regroup. The alien commanders realized that brute force alone would no longer guarantee their victory. It was time to escalate the war, time to use the last of their strategic advantages. They began deploying their most powerful and feared weapon, a massive fleet of warships armed with experimental technology, capable of obliterating entire cities with a single strike. They had not used these weapons until now, knowing the devastation they would bring. But now, they had no choice. The human resistance had to be crushed. The tension on Earth reached a boiling point as the skies grew darker with the arrival of this new fleet, a monstrous armada that stretched across the heavens. The invaders were throwing everything they had left into one final push to break the human will and reclaim their dominance. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. What the invaders failed to account for was the sheer tenacity of the human spirit. As the new fleet descended on Earth, humanity's forces prepared for their most desperate battle yet. With the superweapon in play and Earth's military forces mobilized, the stage was set for the final confrontation. Human leaders knew that this would be the decisive moment in the war, and there could be no retreat, no surrender. The war would either end in their victory or their total annihilation. And as the battle loomed on the horizon, they rallied their forces with a message that echoed across the globe. We chose war, and now we will choose to win. Across the planet, the final preparations were made. The world's united forces took to the front lines, bolstered by the new weapon and the tactical brilliance that had become humanity's hallmark. The battle for Earth had escalated to a scale never seen before, but there was no turning back. Humanity had one last chance to tip the balance in their favor. In the quiet before the storm, soldiers and civilians alike braced themselves for the greatest conflict of their lives. They had already shown the invaders the power of their innovation, their resilience, and their courage. Now, they would show them the true cost of underestimating humanity. And so, with the invader fleet poised to strike, humanity prepared to face them, not as a broken, defeated species, but as a force of nature, united, unyielding, and ready to show the stars that Earth was no longer a world to be conquered. It was a world that would fight, and fight to the very end. The air was thick with anticipation as humanity's forces gathered beneath the shadow of the approaching invader fleet. The skies above Earth were filled with the hum of battle-ready ships, their engines roaring in defiance as they stood poised for the ultimate conflict. On the ground, soldiers, engineers, and civilians alike knew that the coming hours would determine the fate of their planet. Every inch of the Earth had been touched by the invaders' aggression, but now humanity had a chance to reclaim it once and for all. They would face this battle as a unified species, their resolve stronger than any weapon the invaders could wield. The superweapon, now fully operational, hummed with raw energy, its massive charging cells absorbing the very power of the planet's sun. Humanity had spent months perfecting its design, refining its targeting systems and energy output, and now, in its moment of need, it would be the spearhead of their counteroffensive. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of everything humanity had overcome. It was a symbol of the innovation, ingenuity, and unbreakable spirit that had fueled their resistance. And as the massive fleet of invaders descended upon the Earth, the humans knew they would meet them head-on. On the front lines, the resistance forces were ready. Every human who had ever fought in this war now stood shoulder to shoulder, prepared to give everything they had to protect their home. Their faces were lined with the scars of battle, their eyes burning with the intensity of their mission. They had fought for so long, and each victory, each small piece of territory reclaimed, had brought them closer to this moment. It was now or never. The battle began with a roar. The invader fleet unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, tearing through the atmosphere in an attempt to obliterate humanity's defenses. The initial impact shook the planet to its core, sending shockwaves through the cities below. Yet the human forces, prepared for this moment, stood their ground. Ships darted through the sky, exchanging fire with the invaders as humanity's fighters launched wave after wave of attacks. They knew they couldn't win with brute force alone. They had learned to use their enemy's strength against them, striking with precision, hitting the alien fleet's weakest points. And then, in the midst of the chaos, the super weapon was unleashed. The energy beam, forged with the power of the sun, tore through the void, cutting through the alien fleet with the fury of 1,000 storms. The invaders' shields, once thought impenetrable, flickered and faltered before the onslaught. One by one, the alien warships exploded in blinding flashes of light, their mighty hulls disintegrating into the abyss. The first wave of the invaders' forces was decimated in an instant, but there was no time to celebrate. The invaders, reeling from the blow, responded with a devastating counterattack, sending every remaining warship into the fray. For humanity, the stakes had never been higher. The invader fleet regrouped, bringing their full might to bear. The sky above became a battleground of flashing lasers, energy beams, and explosions. Humanity's fighters fought with every ounce of strength they had, knowing that this was their final chance to win their freedom. The ground below was littered with the wreckage of fallen ships, but the invaders were not yet defeated. On the ground, human soldiers engaged in fierce skirmishes with the alien forces that had landed, their guns blazing and their voices shouting in defiance. The superweapon continued to unleash its devastating power, but the invaders' ground forces were relentless. The final moments of the battle would be decided in the brutal confrontation between the invaders' elite soldiers and humanity's brave defenders. There was no turning back now. In the heart of the conflict, a single truth became clear. Humanity had endured, and the invaders, despite their technological might, had underestimated the sheer determination of the human spirit. For every soldier who fell, 2 more took their place, and for every lost city, a new one rose in defiance. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. They would fight, and they would win. The final moments of the battle were nothing short of cataclysmic. Humanity's forces, battered and broken, clung to their last reserves of strength as they faced the full wrath of the invaders' desperate retaliation. The skies above Earth, once clear, had now become a chaotic storm of fire, debris, and flashing energy blasts. The invader fleet, though heavily damaged, continued to pour its fire upon the planet's surface. The superweapon had made a significant dent in their forces, but the enemy had proven resilient. Too many warships remained, and humanity's ground forces were growing thin. The streets of once proud cities had become scorched battlefields, littered with the remnants of fallen soldiers and wrecked alien machinery. What was left of Earth's urban centers had been transformed into makeshift fortifications and last stands, with humanity's soldiers and civilians defending every inch of their homeland. The invaders' ground forces were relentless, their shock troops moving like locusts, overwhelming human positions one by one. Yet humanity's soldiers refused to surrender, charging into every battle with the hope that they could buy just a little more time for their final push. And then came the turning point, unexpected and sudden. It arrived like a force of nature. The invaders' fleet, stretched to its limits, faltered as humanity's underground resistance forces initiated a final, daring maneuver. Utilizing the very same alien technology they had once scavenged, the resistance launched a series of surprise attacks on the aliens' remaining command ships. The invader fleet had been split in two by a clever, coordinated series of feints and diversions, and now the tide was starting to turn. From Earth's surface, it seemed as though the very heavens themselves were burning. The superweapon, now fully charged once more, let loose its brilliant beam, cutting through the remaining alien warships. The enemy's shields flickered and failed under the intensity of the blast. Massive warships that had once seemed indestructible were torn apart, leaving the invaders scrambling. For the first time since the beginning of the invasion, their fleet was not the unstoppable force it had once been. The weapon humanity had created was the hammer that shattered their empire. But even as the invaders' forces crumbled, the cost of victory was clear. Earth's cities were in ruins, entire landscapes changed forever. The human casualties were staggering, and the survivors would carry the scars of this war for generations to come. The victory, though hard-won, had come at an immense price. As the final alien warships were driven from Earth's orbit and the invader ground forces retreated, the world held its collective breath. The silence that followed the chaos was deafening. The sky was once again clear, the fires of war slowly dying out. Earth had been saved, but the wounds of the battle would take time to heal. The cost of survival was written in the bodies of countless fallen heroes, in the shattered cities, and in the spirits of those who had seen their world torn apart. Humanity had triumphed, but victory had not come without sacrifice. The survivors stood on the precipice of rebuilding, knowing that the future would require more than just physical reconstruction. It would demand healing of the emotional scars left behind by the horrors of war. Yet, in the midst of the devastation, there was one undeniable truth that burned brightly in the hearts of all who had fought. Humanity would rebuild, and they would never be taken by surprise again. Earth, once the playground of an alien empire, had become the symbol of defiance and resilience. And the invaders, who had thought they could conquer this world without effort, had learned the hardest lesson of all. Underestimating humanity was a mistake they would never make again. The war was over, but the story of humanity's resilience, innovation, and unity would continue to echo through the stars for generations to come.